If that's what you think this is all about, you're wrong. Jesus was about healing. Jesus was about going to where people, and when these people had an experience with Jesus, Mark 5 talks about 3 different people. Amazingly enough, it only names one of them, Jairus. You know the story of Jairus and his daughter. You know the interesting thing about the name Jairus? It means he awakens. I don't think that God writes this stuff as an accident. I really don't. Some of us think, oh, well, you just go, no, that's not an accident. Mark 5 talks about a man who was delivered from being demonically oppressed, about a woman who was healed from years and years of a blood flow, and a child, or a Jairus, who his daughter was totally raised from the dead. All 3 of these things happen in this one chapter. And you see, Jairus is the only one spoken of that said, basically, like I said, his name means he awakens. I look at this chapter, I think, Jesus wants us to awaken, wants us to see what he really wants us to do. When we read this, we see a Jesus that went out to people, that helped people, that loved people, that went to where they were and saved them. He wasn't trying to, he didn't tell when the demon-possessed guy with no clothes on, all scratched up, and we're going to read that here in Mark 5 here in verse 1 in a second. He didn't tell him to go get cleaned up, put some clothes on, and I might talk to you. Amazingly enough, when Jesus went to meet this guy, and look at this in verse 1. It says, when he came to the other side of the sea in the country of the Gerasenes, it says, when he came out of the boat, immediately a man from the tombs ran with an unclean spirit to meet him. And he was dwelling among the tombs, and no one was able to bind him anymore, even with the chain. Now, Jesus didn't go into the city dock. He could have. He could have took his boat. He could have went down, and if you I wish I had a little map thing I could have showed you this, but you got the lake, the Sea of Galilee, and you got this little offspring like a river, and it kind of gets smaller. And Gerasene's kind of over here off on the river here a little bit. So you'd have to go into the river a little bit and then park your boat, and you would have been in the city. Well, Jesus didn't do that. There was it says there's kind of imagine like Northern California beaches. You got all these cliffs, right? You might have a little beach every now and then, but you got all these cliffs and all these big high rocks and stuff. And then what they used to do in this area is they would dig tombs into all these different rocks right on the shore because they kind of believed, hey, it's a nice little, burial place, nice little cemetery. Well, it's been there for years, and here's this demon-possessed guy running around, sleeping in the graves, just nasty, messed up. And Jesus, when he's telling his disciples to park the boat over by the graveyard, they're kind of going, what are you doing? Because number one, Jesus being a rabbi, he wasn't supposed to go around dead things. He wasn't supposed to touch dead things, definitely. He wasn't supposed to go around that kind of stuff. And he's like, here, park your boat over here, and they're probably going at the graveyard. The city's up the way a little ways. Why do you want to park here? Because why? Because Jesus had a specific thing he wanted to do. He knew what he was doing. It's funny because sometimes God might tell you to go a different way to work. God might tell you to go have some lunch somewhere else. God might tell you to do something different. You know what's amazing? God might even tell you to go have a drink at a bar with somebody. Wow. What's going to happen then? Well, God, I can't go into that bar. I'm not saying to go drink alcohol, but I'm saying maybe God might tell you to go have a drink with somebody. Drink a Coke or something. Sit down next to a guy that's drinking. Go have a drink with him. Well, I can't do that. I can't go in a bar. Maybe somebody will see me. Yeah, maybe they will. Maybe somebody might see you doing something wrong. Well, are you doing something wrong? Well, no, I'm not. Well, then what are you worried about? Jesus went into a graveyard with all his disciples around to watch him. Now, we read that and go, well, what's the problem with that? Rabbis were not supposed to touch dead things. They weren't supposed to go around this kind of stuff. And here comes this naked dead man, or naked demon-possessed guy, smelling like death, runs up to him. What do you think his disciples did? They probably jumped up and pulled their swords out. They were ready to kill somebody. Like, what are you doing, man? Get away from him. But no, he fell on his face and he was desperate, crying out to Jesus. But I think about this, it's like Jesus went to a specific place for a specific reason and knew that he was supposed to do that. Because why? Because God told him to. He was God. He was God, but he was a man. It says everything, you read that in John, he says, everything I do by the will of the Father. Everything he did was God telling him what to do. And the thing is that sometimes when we read this, we forget that the things that we are supposed to do as a Christian, we're supposed to just walk and do what God wants us to do. If God tells us to do something, do it. If God told you to go somewhere, then go there and do it. If God told you to go somewhere else, then go somewhere else and go do it. I always pray this. I pray this. every morning when I spend time, because I get up early, go to work. I like praying in my office, because then I can get away from everything. Because I can just get away from everything. I can get my Bible out and I can pray. And every day I stand there right before my day starts. I say, God, I thank you, according to Psalms 1, that I'm a tree firmly planted by streams of living water, so I know this job is mine. I'm going to stay in this job. I know that whatever I do, I prosper, according to Psalms 1. But God, I'm telling you this, if it's your will for me to leave, it's not going to be the work of man, but you telling me to do it. And that's it. And if God told me to say, hey, you're done here, you need to go do something else, if I don't, I'll tell you what, I'm smart enough not to listen to him anymore. Because I've made that mistake before in my life, and I got myself in a lot of trouble. Because God told me to go somewhere else, and I didn't listen to him. And I got myself in a lot of trouble. But he made everything okay. Everything worked out. Why? Because, if my footsteps are ordained by God, if I follow him, if I do what he wants me to do, things work. God tells me to go to another job, I listen to him. I do it. That's what we're supposed to do. That's the way it works. Your boss shouldn't be making a decision on whether you leave your job or not. The devil definitely shouldn't be making the decision for you to leave your job or not. Oh, things are getting hard at my work. They're talking about layoffs. I don't care. Is layoff a word? Yeah, well, guess what? It's a name. Jesus' name's above every name. You're above layoffs. Well, what if they don't lay you off? I always love it when people say, well, what if? Yeah, well, what if they don't lay you off? You ever consider that one? So here we got Jesus, and we see him going somewhere, specifically to help this guy. I said this last week, when you read the story in Mark, it only talks about one guy. It's talking about one man here. It says, when he'd come out of the boat, immediately a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met him, and he had his dwelling among the tombs. Verse 3, no one was able to bind him anymore, even with a chain, because he had also been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been torn apart, and the shackles broken in pieces, and no one was strong enough to subdue him. And look at verse 5. Constantly day and night among the tombs in the mountains he was crying, gashing himself with stones. And seeing Jesus from a distance, he ran up and bowed down before him, crying out in a loud voice, what do I have to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God, do not torment me. For he had been saying to him, come out of the man, you unclean spirit. It's interesting because you see this guy. Now, when you read the same story in Matthew talks about two men that ran up. And some people have tried to say, well, there you go. There's a discrepancy in the Bible. No, not really. Usually what happens is Mark, as far as we know, was not an eyewitness. He wasn't one of the disciples that hung out with him, as far as we know. He wanted to concentrate on the important part of it because you've got two men here. But he's talking about the one, and he talks about this one because this one went out and did something. Jesus delivered two men from demons that day. When you read the story, there were two men there, and they were delivered. But only one actually went and did something. Who knows what happened to the other guy? God can deliver you of something. God can save you. God can heal you. God can transform your life. But what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it after that happens? And the other interesting thing is just to throw in Mark 5, verse 9, actually, when it says here, and he was asking him, what is your name? And he said to him, my name is Legion. There's a couple different places here where it's used in a plural sense. So Mark does use a plural sense. So it talks about one man, but it's talking about plurality. It could either mean the demon's in him, or it could mean there's another person there. So it depends. I have this nice little Greek Bible interpretation that some people believe that, so I don't know. But look at this here. In verse 9 he says, what is your name? And he said to him, my name is Legion, for we are many. And he began to entreat him earnestly not to send him out to the country. We talked about the pigs last week. I'm not going to talk about it again. Who knows why they went to the pigs. But he gave him permission, verse 13, and they entered the swine, and they went off the cliff, and they died. And the herdsmen of the city went out of the country, and the people saw what happened. And look at verse 15. And they came to Jesus and observed the man who had been demon-possessed, sitting down, clothed, and in his right mind. The very man who had the legion, and they became frightened. It's funny, when you start living as a Christian, people are going to be afraid of you.